It's been a while since I've covered an analog horror series, and let me explain why. Most of these things are repetitive and do very little to expand on what makes the format so enticing in the first place. Instead of seeing something horrifying, or warped in the way that only analog can achieve, I often see, well, nothing of the sort. Whether it be analog horror series that are very clearly just filters over animation, or analog horrors that portray the same tropes done to death, it's become an oversaturated nightmare to sit down and watch through. However, there was one series that I saw get recommended to me time and time again that I think captures what made analog horror so special without being straight up analog horror. In fact, it's one of the few cases out there right now of what I would call digital horror. What separates analog horror from digital horror? Well, let me explain what the difference is between analog and digital is in the first place. Analog signals are broadcast from point A and received at point B, where they're reassembled to the best of their ability. This is how radio works, it's how satellite TV works, it's how much of the older video from eras like the 70s and 80s worked. However, it's not lossless. Basically, the further point B is from point A, the worse the quality of the signal, which is why sometimes you'll hear static over the radio, or your picture won't be as clear. It's because analog isn't perfect that it can be a great vessel for horror. Analog is also infamous for being easily hacked into. Maybe that's not the best word to use, but if you were to figure out the point A and point B of an analog signal, you could theoretically output your own to hijack it. This is what happens in Local 58, which in my opinion is still the series that took the analog part of analog horror to its greatest application. Digital, on the other hand, is much more strict. With digital signals, data is rendered in ones and zeros, where 1 is on and 0 is off. This means that if either point is compromised at all, then you don't get a signal. This is why when you lose internet connection on your computer, websites will simply go down. Digital is more complicated to understand, especially when it comes to the quality of images and such. Basically, digital is supposed to provide you with as close to a perfect recreation of the source as possible, while analog does not. This is why I believe that digital horror is much harder to accomplish, but can be so rewarding. If you want a good example of digital horror, think a film like Unfriended, horror that exists entirely within a digital space. So enough dancing around the digital horror side of what I'm about to look at, how about I talk about what the actual series is called? Fazbear Toddler Fun. If you've heard of this series before, it's probably through figureheads like Sagan Hawks or Martin Walls, creator of the Walton Files. This is a horror series which I would say is profoundly nested in the digital landscape, combining tropes from the 2000s while playing a game meant to have come out earlier than that. What makes the series interesting is in how it approaches making a FNaF horror series. Whereas many of the FNaF analog horror series function more closely to found footage horror movies, this one instead takes on a Pescop style of horror, which I'd call the cursed Let's Play. At the moment, I would say this is a horror trope far less saturated than most of the analog horror meta, but it's also one that's much older. Cursed or haunted video games are nothing new. Everyone remembers Sonic EXE and Ben Drowned. But the seemingly normal Let's Play turned into a horror series is one that's been done far less often, which is unusual to me since it seems like the natural progression of that trope. The only other example of this exact type of thing I can even think of off the top of my head would be the third episode of the Walton Files, Bunny Farm. I'll talk about Walton Files someday, maybe. Honestly, that's one that a lot of people have already talked about before, so what exactly would I be adding? Anyway, in the whole FNaF analog horror scene, this is a series that I had recommended to me multiple times, and I can also appreciate for being relatively unknown. Episode 1 is called Fazbear Toddler Fun Gameplay. On its own, it's a decent little horror short with a build-up that results in a tragic twist ending for the player of the game, but I wouldn't call it spectacular. I can appreciate what it does, and this is only the first episode. So let's start out with the protagonist of this video. Jared is playing a game he developed in the 20th century, he can't remember the exact year, so realistically this could be from any point in the FNaF timeline before FNaF 3. Great. As Jared explains and then reiterates throughout the video, his role in developing the games was less so making assets or coding, but instead being a voice actor. As we find out, he voices every character in the game, which in my opinion is a pretty clever way to go about hiding the low production value of the series. Why do all the characters sound the same? It's because in universe, they were all voiced by the same guy, and that guy is the one playing the game now. There's also something more thematic about it as well that we'll talk about later on. As for secrets, this one's not exactly Walton Files or FNaF Plus, but there are plenty of blink and you miss it moments crammed into this roughly 7-minute video. The video begins with the title card ripped straight out of 2006 YouTube, with the pale blue background and that same font every video used at the time. I do think this is a way to actually age the video itself artificially, along with the entire thing being presented in that classic 4:3 ratio. All in all, I think this makes the video more believable, along with the really poor audio mixing.
The need for talking over him,
I bet you want to play some games, don't you?
Jared's microphone is super quiet, and he often speaks over the characters who are also voiced by him, making some clips practically impossible to hear. It's all very classic YouTube, making the whole thing feel even older. Jared goes on to explain that this is recording one of a game he made with a friend. He describes later on that his role in development was limited to the voice acting, with this other friend being the true creator of the game. When the game starts, Jared encounters Freddy, who welcomes him to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, using that same fake backdrop image that was widely common as a hoax back in 2014 and 2015. You know, the totally real Freddy Fazbear's Pizza that the original game was based on. All these years later, and it's still funny that we got so close to actually being able to buy pizza from Freddy's, and it just never happened. Anyway, while Jared tries and kinda fails to talk over Freddy, Freddy explains that there are two games to play. One is on the left, Balloon Boy's Ball Pit. The other on the right, Pop the Balloons with Bonnie. Don't ask me why the balloon minigame is not Balloon Boy themed, this is just how it works. Fuck you. There is one point where he starts saying, "If you'd like to play Mew," and then the audio cuts off. At first it's not clear why, and even Jared in post types up that the audio cut out there, but it's not very clear what happened. Freddy ends his speech by saying that if you want to go inside the pizzeria, you need one golden ticket. Jared ends up selecting the ball pit where Balloon Boy is waiting inside. He asks Jared to help him find his sister, which means selecting the colored ball that Balloon Boy tells you to select. Last time he saw her, she was playing with the purple ball. So now Jared just needs to select the purple ball. But he can't. By the way, this is the first time you hear background music in this video, and it's actually Minor Corrosion of the Bizet, which is how I found out the Toreador March remix from Pizza Sim is a really weird name. Anyway, while Jared struggles to click on it, Balloon Boy repeatedly asks him to find the purple ball. Eventually, we hear what sounds like a click and the music stops. Jared notices the stop in the music, but doesn't seem to register he has in fact clicked on it. It doesn't help that Balloon Boy doesn't seem to notice either, as he reminds Jared to click the purple ball. Eventually, Balloon Boy's dialogue deteriorates, and he can only say the words, "the purple." The screen lags out, highlighting only the blue and pink balls, and Balloon Boy looks kinda displeased with the whole situation. And then he starts crying. In the background faintly, you can hear what sounds like crying, although Jared doesn't seem to take notice of it. The screen blacks out, and in the very last frame before it goes on, we see this face. It's unclear whose face this is supposed to be, but I do think this is supposed to be the killer, William Afton. Like I said though, this goes unexplained. When we cut back to the outside, Jared gives a nervous little laugh and Freddy pops up, only his dialogue is broken as well and can't be heard correctly. His sprite also disappears halfway through his speech, which definitely puzzles Jared a bit. Interestingly enough, when Jared brings his cursor to the ball pit for a moment, this prompt in the bottom right pops up. It's a little cut off by the UI, but it reads musicboxroom something.exe. At first, Jared doesn't notice it, but it will pop up later. For now, he clicks on the balloon minigame with Bonnie. First off, love the Windows XP background. I know it's probably not actually the Windows XP background, but it's really close. Bonnie asks Jared to help him pop balloons of a certain color, and Jared actually comments on how this voice is his favorite he'd made. The first two times, Bonnie asks for the pink balloon, but the third time it loads in, a new image is hyperimposed over one of the balloons. It looks to be a police car outside of a restaurant with a purple awning. It's hard to make out, but it looks like you can also see an officer. And this time, Bonnie asks in a distorted voice for a purple balloon. Before Jared can react, the screen glitches out and returns to the loading screen. Jared says he had to close out of it, but it's left unclear if he actually forcibly quit, or if the game just booted him back. Whatever happened, he was spooked. Jared tries to move on, clicking the purple enter above the doors. This time, it takes a bit to load in, and he notices the music box from EXE, confused by it. While Jared calms himself down by talking to his YouTube audience about not remembering much of this game outside of voicing it, he's suddenly interrupted by a censored image. The walls are caked in blood, and Jared yells abruptly in confusion at what he's seeing. While he's freaking out, a message in purple pops up on the screen. It reads, "Why, Jared? Why did you work with him? Why? He hurt us so bad. You made the game with him. We want to go home, but he hurt us. I miss my mom and dad, and I will never see them again. Tell him to let us go. Tell him. Please tell him. I'm scared. I can't move." While Jared asks repeatedly, "What the muck?" Freddy's voice repeats back the word purple, and the ghostly image of what seems to be a skull, perhaps one of the crying children, is barely visible on screen. It fades in and becomes more visible, until a sudden flash of that face from earlier, followed by darkness. We then get a purple end card. It reads, "Jared, you can't forget what you did. I remember. You can't hide. I'm here. I won't ever let you confess what you did." End of the video. Now, there's a lot to go through with this video, but I'm sure people who have already seen the series will be mentioning something in my comments. What I just watched is not technically the first episode of Fazbear Toddler Fun. It was the first video made, but after the creator of the series, Agent P-Man 1, decided to go forward in a different direction, this video was unlisted. It's still easy to find, especially since the creator was kind enough to link it in his video explaining why it's no longer listed, but technically speaking, this video is in a separate continuity from the rest of the series. I reviewed it in full though because this is really where it all begins in terms of horror. As the series continues, it becomes more convincingly digital horror and way higher production value. But this is how I first found the series. I could go into all the secrets and mysteries contained within this episode, but I want to save that for the main series once I finish reviewing it. So far, there are 3 videos within the continuity of what I'd call the main series. There's plenty of other content on Agent P's channel that's tangentially related to Fazbear Toddler Fun, but I'm only covering these videos. I'll be more brief talking about these ones instead of my usual frame-by-frame analysis, but these videos have a larger overarching narrative and are definitely worth watching before you continue this video. Alright? Alright, if you stuck around, I assume you either have already seen these videos, or you're just curious about what I have to say about them. So let's go. Episode 1 of the series is called Fazbear Toddler Fun. In several ways, it's a remake of the original video, but with a new plotline that totally does away with the character of Jared in favor of a new, silent protagonist. It opens up with a similar intro to the last video, only this time it's more directed towards another character. I'll rip the band-aid off right now. The character that's supposed to be watching this, and who the white text is communicating to, is named Lance. It's never emphasized who this Lance character is, other than that they recommended this game to our white text protagonist. Something else that separates this video from the last is the absence of voiceover commentary. This time around, any and all commentary is written out in this white text and is usually directed towards Lance, rather than a general YouTube audience. When the game loads in, we see at the beginning a screen that says, "For Joseph, Henry's message." Joseph is a name we had never heard before, but Henry is a name I'm sure FNaF fans are familiar with by now, as he's the business partner of William Afton, and the one we can say created the majority of animatronics throughout the FNaF series. It's unclear why this is here, or what the message is, so we'll go on. The white text goes on to describe that they remembered playing it a few times for their dad, apparently did some recording for it, indicating that their voice most likely is in this game. Also at the beginning we get the copyright year, which is 1997. I have to admit this copyright year is a little confusing based on what we know later, but let's keep going. The last thing to note on this title screen is that the full title is Fazbear Toddler Fun, The Missing Cake Chase. 2 things, the first being the eeriness of Missing Cake Chase to Missing Kids Case, or Missing Children's Case, as well as the implication that this game is one in a series of games. The white text hits play and describes why he's playing this game to begin with. Lance apparently told them that something was in the game that they needed to see. From here on out, much of this video is a rehash of the first, with small changes here and there. For example, Freddy now clarifies that white text is going to need 2 golden tickets to get into Freddy's, not 1. A complaint about the last video I can imagine people would have is that technically, Jared never had to see Bonnie and get another golden ticket to enter. He could have just gone in. Now, it's required. Another change that will come up later is the new UI. It's much rounder and softer and feels more authentic to a digital kids game. This time when the player plays with Balloon Boy, the game breaks and Balloon Boy goes completely silent. One detail I didn't notice before is how when we finally hear Balloon Boy speak, he says, "Can you help me?" and then the orange back button disappears. No escape. At least aside from home. But then after he starts frowning, home disappears too, and he begins crying purple tears. In the final few frames before we continue, we see text in the bottom right which reads, "Michael." and thus our new main protagonist is revealed. The white text, it's Michael Afton playing this game, the essential main character of the FNaF series. Michael plays Bonnie's game next, which this time is themed around colored animals. Everything seems to be going fine at first, with Bonnie asking Michael to find the purple elephant. However, things start to break immediately after this. Bonnie asks for Michael to find the yellow bear. It glitches out a little, so when he should be saying the yellow bear, the is removed, making it sound more like a name. When he tries to select it, his cursor is locked pointing down at the ground. I think you know what the implication is, but we'll save that for later. The screen then glitches out, and at the far end we see a figure who looks like a black shadow foxy. We hear a low grumbling, and then we're kicked back to the title screen. Freddy's smiling a little bit more than he should now, and the subtitle has been reduced to just the word missing. When Michael goes to click play again, he's brought back outside the pizzeria, but now the music is distorted and the screen is dark. In the bottom left text reads, "Do you recognize me? I never left. I saw everything he did because of you. You hurt them, and you're here now." The text fills the screen. "I can show you nice things, all yours." In the final couple frames, the letters blink pink and we go to the loading screen. We're brought to that ending screen from the last video, only now the text reads, "All of it is yours." The screen flashes brightly a few times, and in between those flashes we get this gnarly image of a demon or devil of some kind. It's hard to say just what it is. The final image of the video is Bonnie's head, glowing blue, sitting far back in the dark before it's consumed by darkness. End of the video. So what does all of this mean? Well, basing this off just these first two videos, here's what I've gathered. First and most obviously, there's a ghost haunting this Flash game, a ghost tied to Michael and to William. It seems angry at Michael specifically for whatever reason, blaming him for the actions of William. Most telling is Bonnie's minigame, where Michael is unable to select the yellow bear and the cursor points to the ground. It's not that the cursor can't select yellow bear, it's just showing where he really is, buried under the ground. So then the spirit haunting this game has to be Golden Freddy, right? Let's keep looking at what we saw. Balloon Boy's minigame seems very out of place compared to the rest of the video. One key distinction from the last video this time around is the buttons on the UI disappearing, as well as purple tears running down Balloon Boy's face. I'm certain this scene is a reenactment of William killing a child, and in this instance, I think Balloon Boy was Afton. When he says, "Can you help me?" and the UI disappears, I think that's representative of William luring a child away, especially when you consider that Balloon Boy's tears are purple, and the presumed target audience of this game would be, well, a child. On the flip side, it could also be Balloon Boy directly asking Michael for help, since neither of them can escape. Whatever the direction of the scene, it's an oddball and dark for sure. The biggest mystery to me is that demon face. What exactly is this? Is it just a scary face meant for shock value? Or is it something greater? I hate to tease, but this current script is running on super long, so those next couple mysteries will have to wait for next time. Over the course of these two videos, we've learned a lot about the cursed children's game Fazbear Toddler Fun, easily one of the most influential FNaF series on YouTube. It's really shocking watching this and noticing its influence in other places, specifically in Walton Files. This is the first digital horror series I've covered on the channel, and hopefully it won't be the last. As you're watching, I'm already starting work on a part 2 to cover the remaining 2 episodes. So until then, I'm DMuted. Be sure to subscribe, and peace.